Aloha, everyone. My name is Mark Levin. I don't mean to be hovering over our guests, but I want to make sure our Zoom audience can see me just as well as the audience in the room. I'm the director of the Center for Japanese Studies, and we are delighted to be having this event today. I want to tell you very quickly how this event came together, and that is Gay Satsuma, our associate director, who is retiring at the end of the year. Let's just give her congratulations. And I were having lunch with, if I may dare say, Walter, because I've known him for 30, almost 25 years, but Judge Kirimitsu and Steve Dyer. And we were just laughing at Gay and I as they were telling us these stories about learning Japanese. And we realized all four of us had, to put it in a simple phrase, learned Japanese in a classroom. And that all four of us had just a huge debt of gratitude, especially to our Japanese language teachers. Now, I don't want to knock those people who didn't learn Japanese in a classroom, beginning with people who learned Japanese in their own upbringing, whether that was in Japan or elsewhere, because many of them, if English was not their first language, worked just as hard to learn English. And anybody, and anyway, wherever you learn Japanese, I'm sure you did your homework. My other job is to introduce our MC, who graciously agreed to be a part of today's event, and that is Dina Yoshimi. I have known Dina as long as I've been here, but she's been here longer than me. I'm not going to quote the number, but I will say she was at Yale. I guess we might have walked past each other on the street. Yeah. We were there contemporaneously. And then she went on to get both a master's and a PhD in linguistics at USC, headed towards the sunshine, and she kept going. Dina, among other things, is the Hawai'i Language Roadmap Initiative's founder and director. And the other thing is that we both had our kids at UHMCC, the preschool. Those kids are adults. But when our kids were this big, they were playing together. So we do go way back, and this is my delight. So welcome, Dina. Okay.
Our first panelist is Kati Vasconcelos. She's been an advisor at the Mānoa Study Abroad Center since 2018. She advises students on choosing the best program for their personal and academic goals. She coordinates the faculty-sponsored study tour programs and is the lead advisor for the Machida Japan program and the Shanghai China program. As an undergraduate at Mānoa, I was fortunate to have Kati in a couple of classes. She majored in Japanese language and literature and studied abroad for 1 year in Machida to improve her language skills, passing the JLPT N2, in 2013. And she then received her MA in Japanese linguistics at Mānoa in 2018. She now uses her language abilities and experiences to encourage and advise students, find her, who have interests in using their language abilities overseas. She also wants to learn a language by studying abroad herself, so maybe Italy. That's a popular destination. A kind and supportive voice for students eager to follow in her ever-capable footsteps. Please join me in welcoming Kati Vasconcelos. Our next panelist is Attorney Stephen Dyer. He grew up near Chicago, quite a world away from us, and graduated from the University of Notre Dame, courtesy of a four-year Army ROT scholarship with a double major in Japanese, summa cum laude, and economics. He received his law degree from the John Marshall Law School in Chicago, and while there received a fellowship to study Japanese civil law at Chuo University in Tokyo for a year, preceded by 15 months of intensive Japanese language training at International Christian University in Tokyo. So many of us have that story, don't we? After law school, he entered active duty in the Army with an initial 27-month assignment in Seoul, where he defended soldiers at courts-martial trials, followed by 4 years in Hawaii, where he defended Tripler Army Medical Center in medical malpractice cases. He left active duty, beginning private practice in Honolulu, but remaining in the Army Reserves, assigned to US PACOM, the Pacific Command, for 17 years, and they deployed him for military legal needs throughout Asia, and he retired from that position in 2013. He remains an active trial lawyer and a partner in the firm of Chang, Nishimoto, Sia, Nakamura, and Goya, and many of his clients are Japanese, and he communicates in Japanese daily. Attorney Dyer is on the board of the Japan-America Society of Hawaii and is a leader in the U.S.-Japan Council. He is president of the Hawaii Rotary Youth Foundation, which annually gives $275,000 in scholarships to Hawaii high school seniors. He is also the current president of the Pearl Harbor Rotary Club, whose sister Rotary Club is Hiroshima Southeast, a community-minded individual who truly has taken his Japanese skills to the professional level. Please join me in welcoming Attorney Stephen Dyer. The formalities. And of course, we save our gem, who has served as professor for the day here at UH Mānoa, so I consider you maybe just a part colleague. Judge Walter Kirimitsu. He grew up in Kalihi Palama area, where as a child he helped his Nisei parents farm a half-acre vegetable garden. After graduating from St. Louis School, he earned a BA from UH Mānoa and then completed law school at the University of Michigan. He clerked for Justice Cable A. Wirtz at the Hawaii State Supreme Court before serving for 4 years as a judge advocate for the military at Seward Air Force Base in Tennessee. He then returned to Hawaii, where he practiced law for more than 25 years before being appointed as an associate judge for the State Intermediate Court of Appeals by then Governor Ben Cayetano. In 1999, after serving as an appellate court judge for 5 years, he became the first to fill the role of Vice President for Legal Affairs and University General Counsel at the University of Hawaii. He added educational leadership to his illustrious career in 2006, becoming the first non-clergy president of St. Louis School. He retired from this position in 2015, and then just last year, he was appointed Master of Kamehameha Schools, a position that allows him to combine his extensive experience in the legal and education fields. Judge Kirimitsu has served as the president of the Hawaii State Bar Association and has been the director of the board of directors of the Japan American National Museum in Los Angeles for more than 20 years. He continues to serve as legal counsel to many major corporate clients from Japan and Asia with investments and business interests in Hawaii. A tireless and distinguished leader who is noted for his willingness to listen to others and his considerable ability to carry a tune. Please join me in welcoming Judge Walter Kirimitsu.
Thank you, Dina.
And now that we know before whom we sit, our prestigious panel, I'd like to just briefly introduce the panel itself. The goal of this panel is to celebrate the curiosity, ingenuity, persistence, and successes of Japanese classroom learners and build a sense of this shared endeavor among those of us who are participating today. To that goal, in our first segment of the discussion, I will ask each of the panelists to reflect on their decision to study Japanese. In sum, why Japanese?
I wanted to say it's an honor to be a part of this panel. It's an honor to share some of the experiences that we've gone through, but I'm sure that what you are going through is much more exciting now because times have changed and things have upgraded a lot since I went through the University of Hawaii language program. But before I start, I wanted to introduce my grandchildren who are here. Matthew is sophomore, Matthew?
Junior.
Oh, junior. He's a junior at University of Hawaii Mānoa, undergraduate. And then Sarah Kirimitsu, she is a freshman at the University of Hawaii. I told them they need not attend today. They can watch me by Zoom, but they wanted to see me live. So I'm very, very happy. And I wanted to just talk about why Japanese. Okay. Everybody here has heard of Elvis Presley, right? Did you ever hear him sing a song, I Got Lucky? Well, you'll go to YouTube and he has a song saying, I got lucky. That's my message to you today. I got lucky because when I was born, my mother came from Hiroshima when she was 16 years old to work in the sugar plantation. And she met eventually my father, who was born and raised on Kauai. But because she was born and raised in Hiroshima all her life, she spoke predominantly Japanese. So when she spoke with me, it was all in Japanese. So can you imagine being born and hearing Japanese from the time you were born until you grow up? That's how I got why Japanese, because I had to learn Japanese to communicate with my mother. In addition, my mother ran a vegetable farm in Kalihi, right below Damien High School or at the foot of Kamehameha School, Kapalama. I accompanied her to the vegetable farm every day, walking from Palama to Kapalama. And during that process, she spoke to me all the time in Japanese. So to answer the question, why Japanese? I had no choice. I had to listen to my mother, communicate, learn to communicate in Japanese. So I started to speak Japanese. And she encouraged me to attend a Japanese language school that was in Palama called Palama Gakuen. Palama Gakuen is an after English school, 1 hour a day school in Waipa Lane near Liliha and Vineyard Street. So that I attended Palama Gakuen for about 10 years from during the time of English school. So I was able to be or learn Japanese in the classroom after the regular English school. And all the sensei, the teachers that taught me, they were excellent. There's Urata sensei, there's Murata sensei, there's Matsumoto sensei, Takesha sensei, Ohama Kocho sensei. They were all excellent to teach the ropes. And basically what it is you learn Japanese on the farm or day to day talking to the mother. But when you go to the classroom, they put it together for you. You know, they structure it. And I was able to put together a lesson plan to learn Japanese in a meaningful way. So I got to learn all of that even before University of Hawaii. So by the time I got to University of Hawaii, they said, always take the easy route. I had a choice between German, French, Spanish, and Japanese. So what do you think, what choice do I have? The one that I found the easiest path is Japanese. So I enrolled in a Japanese class. And at that time, there was Uehara sensei, and there was Fujikawa sensei, and then there was a Yasuda sensei. Fujikawa taught us elementary or elemental beginning Japanese. Uehara sensei took us a little bit more advanced. And Yasuda sensei taught us literature, primarily kanji. And that was the toughest road to learn kanji. All of a sudden, all of the daily conversation, they said, translated into kanji. That was tough, But I began to learn it and appreciate it. And that's how I majored in Japanese at University of Hawaii. However,
You're right at time, that's perfect.
Okay.
And you're moving into the next segment, so just hold that thought. Go ahead.
Going to the next segment in the next phase, part 2. So don't go home until you listen to Steve Dyer and Katie Vasconcelos, okay?
He's so good, huh? He's so
Thank you.
smooth. Why did I pick up Japanese or start Japanese? I just didn't pick it up. But I want to ask all of you, how many of you voluntarily have signed up for Japanese? Everybody? Is there anybody who is here kind of against their will or studying Japanese because they had no choice? Guess what? So here's the story. I went to an all-boys Catholic high school outside Chicago. And guess what? I had to study Latin. But then they said, well, you got to have a modern language too. So same approach. The easiest one seemed like French. So I took 3 years of French. But guess what? I never studied. And then when I went to Notre Dame, they said, guess what? First year, you got to have a modern language, or else you can't. You got to take it and pass it, or else you're out. So I figured, okay, I'll sign up for French 2. I've already had 3 years of it. Easy C. Sure enough, first semester, I got my C. Second semester, first week, I didn't study. I figured I got all semester to catch up, right? And bell rings Friday afternoon, my last class. I'm ready to go to the bars. And the teacher goes, Monsieur Dyer, arrivé. And he goes, you were not prepared this week. I go, no, but I'll do better money. He goes, no, no, no. If you show up Monday, I will flunk you. You better go see the dean. Wow, this guy's harsh. So I go see the dean. Oh, that must be Mr. Dyer. Come on in. I go, yeah. He goes, your prof called me, so I took the liberty. I know you need a language or else you're out. I saw you were on a full ride, 4-year scholarship. Guess what? Out, unless you find a language and pass it this semester. So I called the German prof. They don't want you. Spanish prof, sorry. Russian prof, sorry. So Mr. Dyer, I'm afraid you better. The phone's ringing. Wait. I'm like, holy cow, I'm getting kicked out of school. And he hangs up, he goes, guess what? That was the Japanese prof. And at Notre Dame, you have to have 3 students to have a class, and he had 3, one just dropped out. So you probably don't know anything about Japanese culture, do you? I'm clueless, I have no idea. He goes, it's a shame culture. You have to save face. First time I ever heard these concepts. And he goes, the professor of the Japanese class is a Jesuit missionary priest from Sophia University in Tokyo. And if we have to cancel this class, we have to tell the Jesuits and we have to send them back. Guess what? We lose face with the Jesuits and the Holy Cross priests, which is Notre Dame. They lose face. I lose face. Dyer, you gotta rescue me. You gotta rescue Father Hesberg, the president. You're gonna be the 3rd student in that Japanese class. He's waiting for you right outside, right now, in the snow. So you have to make up a whole semester in a week, but you can do it. I'm like, oh, God. So I walk over, and there he is, and, prototypical, the black cassock and the Coke bottle glasses, and he looks up, he's 4'11", and he goes, Dyer! And I figured that's got to be my name, And he goes, Baka! And I had no idea. And then later I figured out, oh, geez. But he throws a piece of paper at me and it goes in the snow. And he's like looking at me like, why didn't you catch it? And I'm like, what? He goes, hiragana, test, Monday, 9 a.m. So guess what I did all that weekend? I learned hiragana. That's how I started learning Japanese. The blessing here is that I was scared crapless. I thought I was going to lose my scholarship, get kicked out. So guess what? Fear. Fear is a super motivator. I have never studied this hard for a class. I never studied that hard for a class in my life. But Minamiki Sensei, the priest, Father Minamiki, South Tree, as he told me the first class, he was like my football coach. I was a jock in high school. I never studied. And he was just like my football coach. He's like, it's one of those. Maybe you've had, I don't know if you have senseis like this, but I responded to this. And it's like, okay. And 3 weeks left in the semester, bell rings. Daya, oideyo. So I go up and I go, here we go again. I'm gone. He goes, Ayamaru. I go, what's that mean? He goes, I apologize. I go, why? He goes, I called you baka. And by then I knew what it was. I deserved it. And he goes, not only have you caught up with the other 2 students, but you surpassed them. you have a gift for language, and I want to tell him, you have no idea, I'm just scared. But you need to go study abroad your sophomore year. I want you to go to my university, Sophia. So guess what? I had to go. So that's kind of what got me, after I did that, wow, that's kind of how I started. So that's my story.
I remember when I was younger, I would remember wishing I had family members like Judge Kirimitsu who spoke Japanese. I'm half Japanese, but I don't have any family members that speak it fluently. They maybe understand a little bit here and there when people talk to them, but most of my family at this point have just been raised speaking English. So any influence or exposure to Japanese language I had was maybe a little word here and there that my grandpa or my grandma would throw into the conversation. But I didn't actually realize it was a Japanese word until I started actually taking classes. But I think I also had a just general interest. Again, I'm half Japanese. I think it's been more drip fed into my life leading up to when I was actually able to take a language class in 8th grade. But we had like little small family traditions that I realized later were Japanese influence. Like we would go to the shrine on the first day of the new year. My grandma would make ozoni on New Year's Day, or I think small things like that, just things that I didn't actually realize were Japanese influence in my life were just there. And when I was younger, I just was interested and wanted to learn more about those things that we were doing. I didn't really understand what it was coming from. And then when I got a little older in elementary school, I remember I borrowed this book from the library called Sadako and the Thousand Paper Cranes. So maybe you know the story about a girl who passed away from leukemia after the bombing in Hiroshima. And I remember just really liking that book. I read it over and over. The librarian remembered me for always borrowing that book, among other books that I also borrowed over and over. But she remembered me for one of those books and reading it all the time. And then maybe some of the students here can relate to this, but I also eventually gravitated towards Japanese pop culture, such as anime and manga. So that, I think, maybe kickstarted my interest to actually want to learn the language. And again, I wasn't able to actually take a language class until 8th grade. But before, I think maybe a year before I started that class, I had gone to a book off and bought a manga of a series I knew I liked. It was all in hiragana, katakana, kanji. I couldn't read it. So I got a chart, hiragana chart, and just got through that entire book. And by the time my 8th grade Japanese class started, I taught myself hiragana just out of pure self-motivated interest, I guess. And then wanting to engage more with the content that I was enjoying in a more direct way rather than waiting for an English translation to be available to me. And then I was able to take Japanese in 8th grade, and I really, really enjoyed it. I feel like I'm bragging if I say I was good at it, but I like to think I was good at it. My teacher liked me, so that's my only bar for how well I was doing. But I enjoyed taking the class. At my school, you would take Japanese for 5 years. I started in middle school, so went all the way to senior year. And I took AP Japanese just because, again, I was interested in it. But at the time, I wasn't planning to major in Japanese. That didn't come until maybe right when I was actually applying to come to UH for school. But I realized all of a sudden, like, okay, this is like the one class I really liked. I would browse the textbooks before class even started, just to look at them and see, oh, we're going to learn this. Oh, we're going to learn that. We're going to learn this. So just over time, I think I naturally developed an interest in learning it. And so when I got to UH, of course, I decided to major in Japanese. I took more classes. The classes were much harder than what I was learning in high school. And I actually had native speaker Japanese teachers as opposed to my high school teacher who was a learner like I was. And I think I also had a native Japanese friend in high school. So I also wanted to, and of course she spoke English, but I also wanted to learn more about what she grew up learning. So when I came to UH again, I majored in Japanese. I enjoyed my classes. I remember being very excited when one semester I just had all Japanese 300 plus level class, including Yoshimi Sensei at some point. So I think it was just, in terms of why Japanese, again, I think it was just kind of slowly drip-fed into my life. And then I kind of kick-started my own interest in learning it. And now I'm here.
Thank you very much. What are your most vivid memories of your time spent in the Japanese classroom or in preparation for class?
I studied abroad in Machida, Japan for a year. And I think that's maybe a turning point for where my language abilities really improved a lot, not just by living there, meeting more native speakers, having to speak it every single day, but even just the classes that were taught there. I remember that there was one class called tutorial, and it was kind of easy in a way. You just pick a subject that you want to get better at, and then the teacher of the class will offer you advice on how to improve that skill. And I chose kanji. I'm a bit of a nerd. I like kanji a lot more than most people that I meet when they're learning Japanese. But I wanted to get better at kanji. I wasn't very good at writing them on command. I would always have to look up how to write them. So she offered me suggestions of these books that I could use as a reference to study. And I think that was just like one of my favorite things the whole semester, is progressing through the books that she showed me in their reference library. I think there's 10 levels. It was specifically the study reference books for the Kanji Kente, the kanji proficiency exam. And I forced myself to start from the very beginning, level 10, the lowest level. And I worked all the way up to level 6 by the end of the semester, I think. And I don't know, I really enjoyed it. I'm not sure how well it really translated to me being a better reader or speaker, but I think for my goals to write kanji better, I was better at writing them on command. I didn't have to look up kanji as often as I used to. And I think my reading also improved. I wasn't doing as much reading at the time, but reading all the manga I was buying was getting easier the farther I got along in those books, or I would learn things I didn't know about beginner early characters that I maybe wasn't wasn't talked about when I was first taught it in class. And then something similar happened for grammar as well. We had a grammar class, and kind of just go into the real nitty gritty bits of the particles, the how particles are used to designate spatial relationships between the speaker or the listener, or objects in the sentence. And I found that so fascinating. That's something I learned way back in 8th grade, had so much nuance into it, and just how one particle can mean so many different things. And I think learning all that actually influenced me coming back to UH and starting my MA in linguistics. Just really being able to deep dive into kanji, to grammar. I think those were really what propelled my decision to get my master's in Japanese.
I grew up in the Midwest, and there were no Japanese in my hometown, and nothing Japanese. I really knew nothing seriously about Japan or Japanese. And learning the language, I had background in Latin, so Romance languages made sense. And then in learning Japanese, it's a whole different approach. At least that was my view, my perception, and it just made sense. In fact, I still think it makes more sense than the Romance languages. And so it asks you, what clicked for you when you studied? And for me, it was not necessarily reversal, but the grammar, how it's sometimes backwards, and you have the verb at the end, and it makes you think differently, huh? It makes you analyze what you want to say differently. Actually, you have to think about it. You can't think in English when you speak Japanese. You have to think in Japanese, because you got to think like a Japanese. And he says, your vocabulary and your kanji are probably better than mine, but you think in English too much. You speak Japanese thinking in English too much. In other words, your grammar is fine, but if you don't know exactly how a Japanese would say something or a phrase, you analyze it in English. And so you wind up speaking Japanese, although it's perfectly grammatically correct. A Japanese national would hear that and think, yeah, you're not a native speaker. So that's probably my biggest challenge. But the positive is you're always working on it. For me, it's a lifetime challenge. Learning Japanese is not something you're going to learn in college. Hello. You're going to get started. It's kind of like learning an alphabet or learning how to read. You'll know enough to study further. And frankly, if you really want to get your Japanese to a point where you can use it in business or even just a conversation, you got to speak it. And the best chance to speak Japanese is in Japan. So I was really lucky during law school to be sent back for 2 years. That really, I built a foundation in college, but I wouldn't be able to be conversational unless I'd gone back the 2 years of law school. That really got me. And, you heard about kanji. I'm kind of a kanji file. I took and passed the Joyo Shiken, so a kanji shiken. So I don't know if they still even have it. This is ancient, okay? This is 1982 or 3 I took it. The Joyo kanji were what the high school seniors had to take. It was, I think, just about 2,000 kanji, the simplest kanji, be able to read a newspaper. I thought maybe that's the greatest accomplishment of my life. I could take it past that. But guess what? I'm rusty now. But it's so fascinating. You guys have learned this, I'm sure, just looking at a kanji and figuring out, it's just so fascinating. So if nothing else, what's clicked for me is just a different way of looking at things.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was told the same thing by instructors, the teachers, as well as colleagues, that when you speak Japanese, you gotta think Japanese. And to this day, I've never figured that out. I always think in my mind, first in English and then translate it in my mind and then speak Japanese. So how do you think in Japanese? So if you figure that out, can you give me a call? And
Yeah.
me too. Yeah,
Me too.
and we can both learn from it. But my vivid memories of language here, learning Japanese, I found, like I said, all of the communications that my parents, my relatives from Japan taught me, in the classroom, it began to be organized and it began to make sense that there is a system in communicating in Japanese, a meaningful system. But the other thing that the Japanese language classes taught me is Japanese language is more than linguistics. It's more than actual learning the language. It's learning the heart, how Japanese think, how it's going in Japan. The word kokoro, it's from the heart. Oyakoko, filial piety. You learn the culture of Japan in Japanese language classes. That, to me, was a vivid, positive memory that I began to understand how the Japanese people think, what is meaningful to them, and even learning kanji. Every name that you learn or every character that you learn has a different meaning to it. The word hashi could be bridge, it could be hashi, chopsticks, but the writing is different depending on the meaning of the interpretation. So you learn all of that kanji, but also the heart of Japan. You begin to learn to think in Japanese or think how the Japanese think. That was a valuable memory or lesson for me. The other thing that was very valuable is the girlfriend that I dated also was in my class. And that was very meaningful because I eventually married her. And this year we're celebrating our 60th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
60 plus 82, so therefore I'm 82 years old. But we met at University of Hawaii and we started to take Japanese language classes together. We were in the same class. The other thing was, we only had about 20 students in our Japanese class. I can't recall any male classmates, all women or female classmates. And one of them, she became the manager producer of Kiku TV. And she was an outstanding student, and she developed into the communications director for Kiku TV. And to this day, I still admire her as a classmate and student. When I went to law school, we had 240 students in the freshman class. I was the only Japanese in the freshman class. And so we were a very minority, but even at University of Hawaii, the male learning Japanese was a minority. However, today, I look at this audience, it's about half and half. So it's more equal now. The male and female both want to learn Japanese, which is a great sign. And then not only that, the lawyers in town in Hawaii, they're all about 50-50. So the women and male, they're becoming closer together in terms of diversity, equality, and so forth. The teachers, they were well known. Uehara Sensei, Fujikawa Sensei, and Yasuda Sensei was the one. He was exceptional because he taught us language and literature in Japanese. And as a result, we had to learn kanji. And that's the challenging task, a vivid memory of how challenging it was to learn kanji in the context of Japanese literature. Holy smokes, that's really tough. And so when I used to pick up my wife-to-be, instead of talking about romance, we talked about kanji. And they said, how do you write that kanji? And I said, don't worry about the kanji. When we get to UH, we'll learn how to kanji. Until then, let's talk about love. He says, well, how you write that kanji? That's okay. And that's how that's how I learned the word ai, which is love in kanji. And to this day, I still know how to write ai. But those are the vivid memories that I have of, it was lucky that we had Japanese language at University of Hawaii at such a long time ago. And lucky that you have the opportunity to learn Japanese, not all linguistics, but also the culture.
For everybody in the audience, I just want to note that nobody talked about cake. Everybody talked about kanji. So those of you who think keigo is tough, piece of cake, right? Nobody even thought twice about it. Must be the kanji. So the last segment is actually the advice segment. This is where I hope that each of our experienced learners who have taken their language and made it fly for them will share their most valuable lesson or lessons that they took away from the Japanese classroom and their learning experiences there. The guiding question is, what is the most valuable lesson you learned, or the biggest payback you received from the time and effort you spent learning Japanese in the classroom?
I'm listening, Steve.
I kind of want to ask you guys, why are you sticking it out? I was very discouraged at first. I'd meet people like Walter in my classes who'd grown up listening and kind of speaking, some Japanese, and I was so envious because their accents were good. They knew stuff. Like, oh, come on, it's unfair. But I'm glad I stuck with it. You will find that knowing Japanese will put you in a position, you have no idea what it is right now as you sit here, but there will be more than one, there will be several in your lifetime where you'll say, dang, I'm glad I know Japanese. And it'll come in handy. So I was in the Army, and when I was a reservist up at PACOM, sorry, a lot of you guys weren't even born yet, but in 2001, we have nuclear subs coming out of Pearl Harbor, and they have these little, they call them VIP missions, where they take out, 10, 15 VIPs that some 4-star admiral wants to have entertained. And actually, I was lucky to be one of those guys. And then 6 months later, by the way, the name of the sub that I went on was called the Greenville. And 6 months later, the Greenville was out again doing its, 3-hour maneuvers. And kind of the highlight, the end of the drill, is they go down to about, 1,000 feet, and they do what's called an emergency blow, where if you've watched your submarine movies, they eject all the ballast and it goes straight up as fast as a sub can, which not that fast, but it's like an elevator. And then it kind of comes out of the water and kind of breaches like a whale. And it's as thrilling as you're going to get on a submarine. So they did that without really looking well where they were going. They figured they're in the middle of the ocean. What could be out here? But there was a Japanese shipping or a fishing vessel. You guys have probably heard about this. You're nodding your head. And there were 35 on this vessel, and it was owned by the prefecture of Ehime in Japan. And they were teaching 9 high school kids how, teaching or fishing techniques, and the rest were crew. 4 of the high school kids drowned, and 5 of the crew, so 9 people altogether. And so I get home at about 7 o'clock, and my wife goes, where have you been? This is before cell phones. Pacific Command, your boss has been calling you. Better call him right away. So I call him, and he goes, hey, Dyer, one of our subs collided with a Japanese fishing vessel. You speak Japanese, you're a lawyer. Everybody's gone for the weekend. Go out to the Coast Guard base there on Sand Island and find out what happened and what the survivors need. I get out there, and there's this captain, and he sees me, and anyway, I think he was a little bit shocked that I was trying to speak to him in Japanese. But it turns out, he says, look, I'm shocked because I didn't go down with my ship. So my ship's gone, but I'm still here. I go, you got to take care of your surviving 26 folks. So what do you need? And turned out he's very grateful. He told me what he needed. I practiced international law with Pacific Command, and one of the concepts of international law is solatia. Anybody heard of this term? Solatia derives from, it's Latin. And the English word we have from solatia is solace. So it's comfort or compassion. And so it's kind of an exception. It's an international law concept that allows you to give aid, money, whatever it is, to an injured party without admitting fault, getting into the legal aspects of it. And so that's what I recommended. We were able to get money, which is kind of funny. I call the finance officer of PACOM, who is this, who outranks me. I was lieutenant colonel, by the way. And she's a captain, which is higher. And I go, look, I need cash, $100 bills. And then I'm gonna put them all in envelopes and inscribe each one with the name of the survivor, 26 envelopes. And they thought I was nuts. But I got them, and then by that time, it's like 24 hours later, they figured out what had happened. And by this time, the media is going nuts. The Japanese are threatening to break our alliance. And I went over there, I explained what happened, because I was on the same ship Same sub 6 months earlier. So I knew exactly what happened. And I explained to him, here's what happened. And the captain was like, no, it must have been intentional. I go, Captain, they couldn't have done that if they were trying to. Seriously, a one in a billion chance. So I earned a black belt in Iaido when I was in Japan. Anybody know what Iaido is? Iaido is the martial art of the samurai sword. And about half the time you spend in Iaido is sitting in the seiza position. You guys know what seiza is? That's how samurai conducted business. And so I took the envelopes, got in my seiza, 2 hands, you forward it, you bow, put your forehead right in that triangle, and say some, kind words. The problem went away. This is all because I flunked out of French.
I'm not sure if my most valuable lesson is unique to Japanese language. Rather, it's more unique to language learning as a whole. But I think it was in 10th grade, my school took my class, well, those who wanted to go to Japan on a Japan tour for a week over spring break. And part of the tour was to go to this indoor amusement park called Joypolis in Odaiba in Tokyo. And I was in Japanese 3 at the time, so 3rd year of high school level Japanese. And up until that point of Joypolis, I thought I was doing great. Like, my Japanese teacher wasn't with us at every hour of the trip, so we would have to figure our own way through speaking with store owners or cashiers, restaurants when we would get food. And I thought I was doing great. I was with my friends who were a year below me, and I was guiding them. I felt like so awesome and smart. And then when we got to Joypolis, we were waiting in line for a horror-themed ride. And the idea was to go in certain groups of people, a certain number of people. But when the ride attendant tried to explain that to me, I had no clue what she was saying. I think only later did I really understand what she was saying. But at the time, I did not know what she was saying. And this was, I think, the first real communication breakdown I ever had in Japanese, because she doesn't know English. I don't know enough Japanese to explain or try to figure out what she's trying to tell me. So I had absolutely no idea what she was saying until a really kind person behind me translated for her. And that was the first time I realized that language is not something you're learning in a textbook as it had been for me my whole life. It's communication. It's your way to communicate with people who are probably very similar to you. So I think from that moment, that was my approach to learning Japanese, to use it as a way to communicate and engage with people who speak Japanese or content that's in Japanese. And now, like, moving forward from that moment, recently I was able to go to Joypolis again, and I was perfectly fine in Joypolis this time. It was great. But since then, I've learned that I think using Japanese to communicate with people has become one of my favorite parts of learning it. I made a lot of friends while I studied abroad, and I'm still in touch with them today. And our primary means of communication is in Japanese. So I can speak with them regularly without too much communication breakdown. I can engage in more anime and manga content than before, even in the native language now. Recently for work, I visited our partner schools in Japan, and I met the people who work there in the international student office, and I was able to speak with them in both English and Japanese. But I think that was my most valuable lesson. And again, one of my favorite things about learning Japanese, I can engage with Japan on multiple levels. Now I can take my parents up and down Honshu when they speak not a single word of Japanese, and we're just fine. I do have one relative, like maybe a distant relative, who does speak Japanese, but I don't see her very often. I could communicate with them in Japanese. So I think, again, that's just my most valuable, treasured part of learning Japanese.
That's a beautiful thing.
The biggest payback I can summarize is in Japanese. I've translated to "shakai no tame ni yaku ni tatsu hito ni narinasai. And as you know, that means to strive to be one who is useful to society. That's the payback that I learned, is learning all of this language and culture of Japan. Again, I got lucky, has expanded my horizon to such an expansive world, not only remaining in Hawaii, but like Katie and Pete, Steve talked about, communicating in Japanese. We communicate with the corporate clients, we communicate with religious. Steve had experience of having the Catholic priest who is from Japan and who can communicate. It expands your horizon to worlds that you would never see if you did not learn the Japanese language and culture. I had experience with Japanese corporate clients doing business in Hawaii. They ran travel agencies, restaurants, commercial buildings, enterprises. It expands the horizon, and the ability to speak Japanese really has helped the relationship that we developed with people from other countries. And whether we like it or not, if we speak Japanese to them, we feel they have a little more trust in you, that we can trust you, we can rely on you. Your word is good. But if we don't communicate in Japanese, I don't know. So that has really expanded the horizon. So for you, learning the language is just the beginning. It's going to expand to learn the culture, to learn human relationship, and expand your world to international relations. And then at the termination, you're going to think, gee, I have to give back. And that's why I came up with a motto that you have to be one who is useful to society, to give back what we all received. Steve, whether he likes it or not, that experience with Ehime Maru, his role, it is such a huge task to communicate when they have lost so many lives and to console them. And he did it in a fashion that not many people can do. But that's what you learn from the language, from culture, heart, and it expands your horizons. So my message to you is, this is only the beginning. You continue to learn the language, you continue to learn the culture, and be nice to your teacher, sensei. Once in a while, say, arigatou gozaimasu, arigatai desu. Wasuremasen. You have to acknowledge the teachers, because they're the ones who are guiding you and leading you through life that is just beginning for you.
I think that will happen no matter what, no matter how much preparation you do. Just going there and arriving and think, oh my God, I'm actually here in Japan to study abroad. It's scary and overwhelming sometimes, but I think getting over that takes time, and knowing that ahead of time maybe it helped me a lot in the beginning. But I was fortunate to also just have friends with me, or I was able to make new friends that were also on the same program. And not like Japanese friends, like other English speaking, here to learn Japanese friends who were also going through the exact same feelings. I think that's maybe the easiest way to get through it, because again, it's going to happen no matter what, unless you're much braver than I am. But having a support system around you, like friends, the staff on site are probably very used to students feeling that way and are there to help you. So I think just using them as your guide to get through the day-to-day until suddenly you realize that you're used to it and you've adjusted to the new surroundings.
I envy you. Go. You're not gonna have any problems. As long as you have a positive attitude, it's all about learning. And everybody between you and every Japanese you meet will understand that you're learning. And as long as you know, are a kanji no ito, and you're kenson, do you know this one? You're not gonna have any problems. I'll give you an example real quick. My first day in Japan, I go to Sofia, my first day, I'm coming home, it's August, right? So it's hot, it's muggy, you know, Japan in August, give me a break. And I remember getting off the station, I had to walk up a hill to the dorm I was staying at. And I'm sweating, you know, and at the top of the hill is those mom and pop stores. And they have one of those little reitos, you know, like a freezer outside. And, there's ice cream in there. And I thought, I'm going to treat myself to an ice cream bar. So I open, I look, I reach out, I see a fudge bar. I'm thinking, I'm going to enjoy this. So I pay, I take it off, put it in. It's Anko.
Not ice cream.
You know what Anko is? Soybeans. So I was kind of like, oh man. And you just got to laugh it off. It was like, you know what it is. This has become one of my favorite stories. Or when I was sent out to buy vegetables and they wanted me to buy scallions. I go, what's the word for scallion? And they go, wakegi. So I'm walking to the Yayoi, the vegetable store, and wakegi. And I walk in there and I see the guy and he goes, what do you want? I go, wakige. Junihon Guruzai. And so finally, I leave. And when I get back, they go, well, where's the wakegi? I go, oh, wakegi. I asked for wakige. And they go, you idiot. You know what you asked for? 12 armpit hairs. So anyway, you gotta just laugh about this. You're gonna make mistakes like this.
I don't think it's too late. He should continue to try and stick with it. It helps to have a friend or two that perhaps they can learn together, especially if the friend has experience in Japan or speaking Japanese. I think it's young to learn. Even at this stage, I'm still learning new language. Watching the NHK news, I still learn new kotaba. In the law field, you always can use someone who speaks Japanese or is bilingual, bicultural. So I would say the legal field, there is a demand for Japanese-speaking lawyers. In technology now, with the advancement of technology, it's always a technology company that's doing business, especially in Japan. They wouldn't want somebody from Hawai'i, employ them, can speak Japanese bilingual. In our state Supreme Court, we have a Justice, Sabrina McKenna. She's totally bilingual, bicultural. I had some Japan teachers coming to visit Hawaii, and I wanted to show them the judicial system of Hawaii. And I took them to the state Supreme Court, and Justice McKenna, she explained everything, the whole state judicial system in Japanese. So to answer your question, I think almost every industry, including banking, they would want to hire somebody who can speak and who can understand Japanese culture. So yeah, there is a demand. That's always, of course, the courts can always use interpreters.
I agree, but not just law, just about, there's always opportunities for, if you're a Japanese speaker. Frankly, don't rely on Japanese to get you a job. Become proficient at something. And then knowing Japanese will put you ahead in whatever that area you've chosen. My best friend owns a marketing company, has 175 employees. He can't find enough Japanese speakers. So there's plenty of opportunities.
Most of my thoughts on Japanese language use, like I honestly didn't think I would use my Japanese when I started working for the Study Abroad Center, but rather than the speaking, I mentioned before, like I was able to speak with our partners abroad, but they also are English speaking, so that technically isn't necessary. But I am still able to use like the skill from learning language to advise students to go abroad. Like so studying abroad experience, like how to, what to expect as a learner, a language learner when studying abroad. So there are ways maybe that aren't necessarily career as like a point for career recruitment, but there you can become creative with how learning a language can be utilized in your career. It may depend maybe on what you want to learn Japanese for. Like I said, most of my day-to-day now, I speak English, like at work with most of the people, my partners abroad, but I still try to maintain my Japanese just out of interest. So being able to engage with my friends, being able to engage in content I enjoy. So maybe finding a way to use what you enjoy about Japanese to use it as a tool rather than a thing to learn. Recently, like since Netflix has quite a few shows in Japanese, recently I've changed the subtitles to be the Japanese subtitles instead of English. So that's like my fallback if I don't catch what they hear or what they say, sorry. And recently, that's actually been very helpful. I've been very proud of myself to get through certain shows without ever turning on the English subtitles. And if I don't recognize the word in the subtitles, I can just pause it and look up the word and I learn a new word right there. And it's still in a way where I can engage in something that's interesting because I'm choosing to watch this show.
No, it's a very good question. I think it speaks actually to what Judge Kirimitsu said earlier, which was that strive to be somebody who can be useful. And I think perhaps exploring a little bit of where the nonprofits have a need for somebody who can speak Japanese. I know the HUGS program, HUGS for Children with Cancer, they have programming. They always have people who are speaking Japanese. I'm sure there are other organizations, and just finding that space where you feel like what you're doing is making a difference is, I believe, what our panelists have in common, right? That they have found a pursuit that they enjoy, and within that pursuit, Japanese has become an asset for them.
Just maybe adding to that real quick, there's various organizations, fun organizations where you meet other people maybe with, in the same boat or with similar interests. Like, for example, Japan American Society of Hawaii has a next gen group, young people. The Japanese Junior Chamber of Commerce. You meet a lot of people with similar, backgrounds, ideas, issues. So it's always good to have like company.
Today, we have heard really quite a lot of experience, quite a lot of wisdom. And the take-home points are, of course, going to depend on your own experience and your own interests. But I want to, at this point, have a round of applause for our panelists.
So I also want to thank our panelists. I want to thank our MC, who was so thoughtful in organizing this. It may have looked casual, but actually a lot of time and effort went into how can we make the best of it. Sitting in the back, this was just thrilling to be watching. This was really what I hoped we could be doing. And so I really am truly grateful. I want to note that In addition to the folk in the room, there's about the same number of people online. So I want to thank our online audience, if you can see me here, for being here. And with the signups, it's actually kind of fun because we have about an equal number of undergraduates, which CJS our events. Please come. If you're an undergraduate, please come to more of our events. But that's terrific. And then seniors who got the word through our community mailing list. Which you already heard one question from that. So that too tells me we've really made this event work. And we'll thank you all again.